And here we are. Welcome to Live from Lockdown, week number 28. Oh boy, has the time flown. So thanks for joining us. I see we've got a lot of our good regulars here. This is the cafe crew coming together. And this week I've got something really exciting for you. Well, I mean, it's sort of exciting for some people. But what it is it's super necessary. So I've had a lot of inquiries, however you want to say it, about presets, brushes, actions, all these kind of things, and it seems that people still, keep asking so many questions about how to back these up, save them. So I decided we're going to take a little bit of time today, and we're going to have a look at our presets. And of course, get questions and answers, drop them there in the chat pod. For those of you joining us live, you're going to see us a very lively chat. Great group of people. If you're watching the replay, that chat won't show, but feel free to drop your comments into the comments section. All right, so why don't we just, without further ado, let's just jump straight in. So today we're going to be looking at presets, and I'm going to show you how to do a lot of different things. Right now I'm just going to change my workspace to a presets workspace, and these are our presets. So as you can see, there are a ton of them. So let's just have a look here, make sure that everything is working right. Everyone can hear me, everyone can see me. That's great, awesome. Okay, so we're going to be looking at some of these different presets. Of course, once I click, they're going to show. And so we've got brushes, actions, patterns, gradients, styles, shapes, swashes, and tool presets. Of course, we've also got workspaces. So we're going to have a look at all of these, and these are just kind of some live ones I've got going right now. Now, if you want to know where these panels are, just choose Window, and under the panel, you'll see a bunch of different ones. Now, in 2020 or Photoshop 2020, some were added, such as gradients, patterns, shapes. These were added as panels, whereas before they were only menu items. And I don't know if you guys are even using tool presets, to be honest. There's another one that's super useful. Not a lot of people use them for some reason. But basically what these are add-ons that we can get for Photoshop to help us. Things like brushes and patterns and stuff enable us to create art or overlays, different effects, different types of things like that. They're super, super useful. And then some other things are just strictly utilitarian, just to save you time, such as actions, although you can do creative things with actions, of course. And tool presets, these just save you clicking around and just doing a lot of things over and over again. So that's really the purpose of them, and also a place to save things, like when we create layer styles, for example, or custom contours, which there's no contours panel, strangely enough. And if you want to find the contours, you're going to find these under, let me go to, I might have to have a document open. No, they're under the Automate menu, and if you go under Automate, where are we? Automate. Oh, we'll get to these. Of course, my brain always goes blank when I do these. Hang on. Where are we? There we go. We're under the Edit menu, under Presets, and then we have the Preset Manager. So the Preset Manager used to be full of all of these. All of these things were there, but now it's just down to contours and tools. That's pretty much all that's left inside the Preset Manager. I'm not even sure why Adobe still has it. I guess they're working on it, and I would assume pretty soon that contours maybe will get their own panel, and then this will be gone. But this is all the presets inside of Photoshop. Now, the first thing we're going to talk about is, how to get all of these presets. Let me just hit the Control key and click, and this will collapse all these groups. So what's really changed a lot is, and it started with brushes. Instead of just having everything in a panel, they started to go into groups. And in fact, we can change how all of this looks. Why don't I just get out of here, though? I'm just going to go to my live stream workspace just to kind of simplify a little bit here. And then what we're going to do is we'll open up the brushes. So we can just start with just one simple panel here. Now, all the panels work the same. And notice as we drag them out, we can go to multi-column or we can go to single column. There's different ways of viewing these. So if we click on this little menu, this little hamburger menu as they call it, we can change the way this looks. So right now, what we've got is just the brush name. So you can see the name. Now this works the same in all the presets, so the different presets can be names or whatever. Or we can show the brush stroke. This is what it looks like when you drag with the brush. Or maybe the brush tip might be more useful for some people, because sometimes we have different shapes, like the shooting star, or these particular shapes here, and you can see, okay, this is what I get from it, and I'm just going to just tap with it once rather than drag. So it works almost kind of like a stamp. In fact, why don't I demonstrate? Let's just create a new file right now with black as the foreground color. Why don't we grab something like this lenticular cloud, and then if we go in there and we click once, notice it creates the clouds because this is more of a stamp brush. Now, of course, we can drag with this. Let me make it smaller. I'm going to undo this. We can paint with these as well. So all basically a brush is just it's a stamp. It's a shape that we can drag to do different things. So you can click with this, you can drag it like that, or stamp. And all brushes work that way. Now, some brushes, of course, like our round brushes, there's not really a lot to look at for the stamp. These are designed for painting or dragging with. So the stroke here will show you what happens when you drag with it. The icon preview shows you what it looks like, or what that foundation or the base shape is. And if you see these little tapers like this, the taper means that pressure sensitivity is set to size. So that means if I'm using my Wacom tablet, for example, here, and I decide to paint hard, it's going to go thicker. And if I paint lighter, it's going to create a lighter stroke. Let me just show you here. Just light touch, heavy touch, light. See, so you can change the size. If you see this kind of like... that tells you that this is a hard edge brush, this is a soft edge brush. You can see that. Now, if you go to one where it fades at the end, that means that pressure sensitivity is going to be set for opacity. So if I do light, it's super light. If I push hard, it gets darker. And if it's turned on for both, you're going to see both a taper and you're going to see this fading. For example, here, we can see that this doesn't just taper, but it also fades. So that means if I go light, we're going to have a thin, light stroke. Go harder, it goes thicker. So this kind of just tells you a little about the brush behavior. And of course, we're just talking about brushes. Let's look at a different one. Let's go under the window here, and we can look at the gradients panel. So let me just resize this. And of course, we can click to drag to resize all of these. And then when we look at the gradients panel, well, this one is not going to work with brushes, but it still has some similar behavior. We can have text only. So if you just want to go by name, and this can be sometimes useful for brushes too. Let's do that. We get rid of these options. And we can see now we've got the name. So this, if you just know what these names mean, it makes it nice and easy. So all the preset panels can work this way. Or if you don't want to have the text and you want to, show them as a list, we can have a small list there with the text. You can take the text away. I believe, or I guess the list here only shows the, in this particular one, the list is going to have the name there too. Okay, so we could change this to a large list. So these options might vary a little bit based on preset, but more or less what they're going to do is just enable you how you want to view these presets. So if you'd rather see them as a thumbnail, there we go. The thumbnails get rid of the names. So we can see the thumbnail there or the list. So let's go back to all of our presets. So I've just saved these as a preset workspace. And notice I've got some of these set different ways, just so we can kind of see. Some of these are in lists, some of these are in groups, some of these are using thumbnails. And these are just different presets, and you can see the name of there. So how did I create this? Well, I basically just went through here and I just enabled all of these different presets into different panels. And in the panels inside of Photoshop, you can drag them. And so what I did is I enabled these panels and I dragged them and just kind of set them up on the screen like this. Now, obviously, this is not convenient for working because these are, just covering the whole screen. However, if you're using two screens, which I often do, I could drag these to my second monitor and all those presets are available and easy to select in a single click. Now, of course, you might, rather than load them up like this, you might decide to load them into a list. See what I'm doing is I'm just dragging them in here now, putting them into I guess you would call this a supergroup. Not a supergroup like music, but, you know, a supergroup like a group of panels. And notice how we can drag these between the different groups here, and we can just kind of snap them into the panels. So you could maybe work this way and snap these into the edge, and then just hit the arrow, and then we can see, there's all our panels now. And of course we can drag them like this and just go to icons. And then if you want to work this way, you could go in here and work with your presets. So all these presets are now available here inside of Photoshop, and that's kind of how we just manage them on the desktop. But what I want to talk about is the different assets. So the next thing we want to look at, if we go to patterns, and if you go in here, you'll see, you know, hey, there's some patterns in here. I got some trees and water and some of these other ones that have been added more recently, you know, awesome. We've got leaves, and we can just kind of click in here now to apply the different presets. Great. But what about the old ones, or the ones that came with Photoshop? So there's a library with every single one of these panels. I'm just showing you right now with patterns, but remember this applies to every single one of these. If you click on this little hamburger menu and you go down, you see this option for legacy. In this case, it's legacy patterns. If I was in shapes, I would see legacy shapes, legacy brushes, etc. So if I choose this option, what it does is, you saw a little movement there. That's because now these legacy patterns are loaded, and these come with Photoshop. So these are free with Photoshop. And if we go under here, we can see 2019 to some, but there's the legacy patterns. If we go all the way down here, and I hit the Control or Command key, I can click, and this will open all of these groups at once. And look at this. Here's some of the old ones that were in Photoshop before. Stone, you know, some of these. And then, of course, the world's most famous one. Let me see if I can find it. Wow, there's a lot here. And some of these you might not have even known were there. And, of course, you know, the world's most famous one in there is the bubble one. It's never used, but it's there. And so these have been in Photoshop. These particular ones here have been in Photoshop forever. And these can be so useful, you know, for creating patterns, textures, different things like that. And notice how we can manage them like that. Or we can make a smaller list if you want to be able to see more on there. And of course, if you prefer to go to the thumbnails, we can go in there, and this makes it a little bit easier. There we go. There's our famous bubbles one. And so depending on the preset you're working with, you might find that the name or the description might be more useful, and in some cases you might find that these thumbnails are more useful. For patterns, I think the thumbnails are much more useful. And notice we've got all these additional patterns now because we found them in the legacy. Now, if you want to create your own patterns, you know, it's quite simple. Let me just show you here. So maybe I'm going to drag an arrow into there. Awesome, that arrow is just amazing. And then if I choose edit, we can go down here and we can define different things here. We got brush sets, you know, or patterns. So if I click here, I can define a pattern. I'll call it arrows. Click OK, and you can see there it is. There's our arrows pattern right there. Let's drag it onto the page. Let's hide the arrow, and there it is as a pattern. If I double click, change the scale, you can see that it starts to tile automatically, which is how patterns work. And of course we can rotate them and do different things with them. So we can create our own patterns. And what I would recommend doing is maybe to create a group. When you're working in here, you might want to create your own group. Let me just apply that so we're not in there. Great. And then you want to just click here, and maybe I'll call it Colin's patterns. So we can create these groups very, very easily. And then once you've created these groups, you can drag different presets into them. So, there's our arrow. So let's just click and drag down. Come on, you can get there. I could use a scroll wheel at the same time. There we go, and click in there, and now it's in Colin's patterns. So one of the things I would recommend, for, especially for the workflow I'm about to show you, is create a custom set for the patterns or any of the presets that you want to back up. So now we're getting a little bit into the management side of things, and we're going to just kind of build on things. So what you want to do is create that group, and this is like, this is where I'm going to create the patterns I want to keep forever. So you don't necessarily need to do the ones that come with Photoshop, but maybe ones you've found from other places, or ones you've created yourself, or ones that you want to put into the special set. You can just kind of drag them in there, and then we're going to, in a minute, look at how we would back these up. All right, so that would be the patterns. Same thing with the brushes. Let's go into the brushes here, and let's look at our brushes. Right now I'm just looking by name, which is not that useful. Maybe I want to change this to show the brush stroke. Or maybe I just want to show the brush tip. Let's go here, we'll turn off the stroke, and we're just going to look at the tips. There we go. So we can see now this gives us a good idea of what's in there. Notice I created this group called Colin. And in this group, I've got all of these. Let me just control click to collapse them all. All these brushes that I know that I want to use that didn't necessarily come with Photoshop. So I've created my own group, and in this way I know where they all are. They're all in one place. And so I would encourage you to do that and go through there. Same thing with the actions, although I have mine broken into 3 categories here. I have Live from Lockdown ones I use just for teaching. I've got my PhotoshopCAFE. These are kind of practical, different things I might do, cartoons, dodging and burning, just things I do a lot. And then I have one called Utility, and we've already kind of covered these in a previous lesson where we looked at at actions. We did a previous Live from Lockdown where we went in depth. If you want to know more about it, check it out. You guys can see that there. So I just called that one Utility. Okay, so let's go back to our presets. I'm just going to reset the presets, and this will put everything in the middle again. And by the way, when you create this custom workspace like I did, all you need to do is just click on the side here, go down, and choose to New Workspace, and you give it a name. And then whenever we go back to that workspace, we can see everything. So, if I go to, a different photo editing one I was using, and then I want to go back to my presets, there we go. Now notice how if I've got these all and I've changed them and I want to reset them, let me just change them so you can see, because all of this just kind of works together. All right, so I've got them all messed up and I want to reset them. Just choose under there and then just choose reset, whatever the name is. This case it's presets. Boom. And that'll reset it and just clean it back up to however it was when you saved it. All right, so we've got a lot of different things we're covering here. Okay, I'm going to just up the ante a little bit on this now. Well, first of all, actually, before I do that, let's look at another category. Let's look at tool presets. So one of the things I like to do, and let me just go back to here, just changing these workspaces all the time. All right, and I'm just going to create a new layer, and say I'm working with the line tool. The line tool is really useful. But one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to use this for callouts. So I'm going to create red. So I'm going to click on the swatch here, and I'm going to choose red for my foreground. All right, so we've got just red, so we can draw red lines. Now, notice this has got an arrowhead. If you click on here, we can set the arrows, start, end. So if I do this, now we're going to have a double-sided arrow. So we can do different things. We can change the thickness of that. Maybe we want a thicker one. Now, if I want to use this again, which very, very often I do, go to the top left here under presets and click plus. And this is a line tool preset, but I'm going to call it a double arrow. Red. Now, if I don't want to include the color, if I turn off include color, whatever my foreground color is set to is what it's going to be. But I like to use this specific shade of red for my callouts. So I'm just going to include the color, click OK. So now if I'm in my line tool And I change this. I don't want to have a start or end anymore. And I want to make this blue. So now I'm drawing with these blue lines. In fact, why don't we make it thinner? Let's make it a thin blue line. There we go. All right. Now I want to do some arrows. I want to do these callouts. So all I need to do is go under here. And we go under our presets here. Notice this is a set. Show all tool sets. Let me turn that off. Let me see if that's working right. Here we go. Show by tool, show all. Okay. Let's turn that off. Okay, so for some weird reason, maybe I have to go here first and change this so it turns off all. Did I get that right? Let's have a look. And then we click here, and then we go to presets. Okay, so you should be able to filter. Oh, here we go. Current tool only. There we go. So now as I choose a different tool, it's going to show the presets just for that tool. And of course, you know, you can do your gradients, you can do all kinds of things. But let's grab our line tool. And with our line tool, we're going to grab that double arrow red. And now, look at that. We're drawing with that double arrow red. Or we can do our 2-pixel red line. Or we can go to our black arrow. And so you can see how we can save so much time by using the commonly used presets there in these tools. So maybe there's things that you do in the gradient. You do foreground to transparent a lot, or you do foreground background a lot. So instead of having to go up and go through all these, you could just go here and you could create a preset. So let's do our foreground and background. And let's just call it FB. So that's foreground and background. Maybe another one that you might do a lot is, let me just reset, maybe you do black to transparent. So we can go under our presets here, scroll to the top, and here's our foreground to transparent, which is black. Let's create a preset. So if we include that gradient, DT for black to transparent, why don't we flip it around, hit the X key, now we've got the white. Hit plus WT. So now we've got white to transparent. So now when we go through here, we can select our different gradients. And notice how they're changing at the top. See that? Background to transparent. Foreground. White to transparent. Oh, we should have set that background as black. Let's flip that around. We want black. There we go. Okay, there we go. Nice. So we can sit in here, and so we can create all these different presets, and now we can just quickly go in and use these. And I'm just using these as examples. So, you know, gradients, shapes, lines, you know, brushes, pencils, all these, even the brushes, we can create tool presets for those brushes. So I would encourage you to take a little bit of time and create some packages of these presets. Or whenever you create something you know you might want to reuse it, just remember to just go up here and just click on the little plus, and boom, we can start to create these presets. Now we have the option there. When I did that, this lets me create a brush preset instead. If I didn't want to create the brush set, I would say no, click here, and it creates it as a tool preset. So you can see how we can do that. So that would appear as a tool preset or a brush preset. You can create both of those. All right, so one more thing before I show you how to back up all these presets, because obviously once you spend your time creating all of these, which are going to save you so much time, once you've created all of these, you will want to back them up. And I'll show you. But there's one more thing I want to show you. And let's go to the brushes. So we'll go back. Why don't we just go back to our presets group, and I'll just reset this. There we go. So under brushes, if you click on the end here, you can see there's more brushes in there. So you can click on these brushes and this will load these in. So these are the ones currently with Photoshop. There's a lot of brushes, so you're probably not going to load in all the brushes at once. Just so you know, I mean, if you want, you can. And of course, you can close the different groups, you know, if you don't want to use those later. You know, you could go in here and You could just delete the group if it's saved. That wouldn't really matter. Or, there's different things you could do. You could drag it to the trash can to get rid of different groups or brushes. But if you have them saved, then it won't matter. You're not going to lose them. But here's an option here that enables us to get more brushes. So when we click on there, this is actually going to go to Adobe. And under Adobe, we've got all these different brushes. Let's get the Manga Brushes. So all you need to do is click on download. It'll download those. Let's go to my downloads, open downloads, Manga Brushes, double click, boom, and that's it. Now they're loaded. So if we go to the bottom of our brushes panel, there's our Manga Brushes we just got right now from Adobe. And you can see them there. And, you could start painting or drawing with those, or whatever you want to do with them. So there's some Manga Brushes. So you can see you can get more presets. Now there's different places you can go online. You can get the different presets. DeviantArt is another place, where you can go get brushes and different things like that. Brush Easy is another one. And if you guys have resources that you particularly like, why don't you drop that into the comment and let people know, hey, this is what some of the brush resources that I have. Let people know in there. So just drop that into the chat there. And if you're watching the replay, drop that into the comments. Now, before we go on and I show you guys how to save these, back them up, and actually create an automated backup, do me a favor, smash the like button. That's the thumbs up. And that just kind of helps the algorithm spread out and let people know that we're streaming right now. So it just kind of gets it up there in YouTube. And also, if you haven't subscribed yet to Photoshop Cafe on YouTube, just click that subscribe button. Now remember, it's a toggle. If you're already subscribed, clicking it will unsubscribe you. So make sure that you are subscribing and not unsubscribing. And if you do unsubscribe accidentally, just click it again and it will subscribe. And in that way, you'll get a notification on YouTube and turn those notifications on. So when we're doing these live streams, you guys will know. Because I am going to be doing some other live streams without announcing them in the future. Just, just quick ones that we might do. And if you're subscribed, you'll know. Now, one other thing I'm going to ask you guys before we move on is if you are a subscriber on our YouTube channel, and this is where you are basically interfacing, with the content, and you've been relying on the YouTube emails to let you know when we're doing the live streams and when I upload new tutorials, YouTube is no longer sending out those notifications. So if you want to get those notifications, just go to photoshopcafe.com and then you'll see all over the places, lots of places where you can join our mailing list. So I encourage you to join the mailing list because I'm sending out the emails and a lot of you got the notifications. That's how you got here today because I sent out the notifications myself. So that's what we're going to be doing for these live streams is I'll send them out. So make sure you're on that list so you're going to basically, you'll know when we go live. All right. So let's move on a little bit. So let's talk about a strategy for backing these up. So we've looked at some of the things we can do with our presets. We've looked at how we can organize them. And, it's a lot of work to create preset sets. And these sets are going to be super useful for you because when you go to new computers or you update Photoshop or whatever, these are sets of presets that you can take with you forever. So, and if you're on Creative Cloud, when you log in, all your brushes and everything you're going to load in, and these will be set up. So there's some different ways of doing this. So if we look under the, let me go to the, I believe it's the Edit menu, and we look under Presets. We have some options here. So we have the Preset Manager, which we looked at, and the only thing really that's there now is the contours and the tool presets. But that's where you can save them. And that's just kind of the variation of the theme, so to speak, of everything else. So anything else, we can just click on here and we can choose to import or export selected brushes. So if I wanted to save these ones, I would just select these brushes. And all I did is just click and then just shift click to select all the brushes in between. Or you could just click on the brush set if you want to save the whole set, which is why I would recommend creating a set like Colin's Brushes, which I have in here. I have a set called Colin's Brushes. And all the brushes I want to save, I can just click in here, and then I know these are the ones I'm working with. So this is where I will put in my brush presets, my new brushes. I'll drag them in there, etc. And then what we can do is we can export selected brushes. And now this is where you want to save a location. You might want to go do it locally on your hard drive. You might put it to an external drive. Maybe you've got a RAID or something like that. You might want to save it to your Creative Cloud account. Or you could save it to a Dropbox or a Microsoft One account. In this case, I'm saving this to Dropbox. And under Dropbox, I've got a Photoshop folder. And under that folder, I've got 2020. And I'm saving all of my presets under this one folder. So right now, this is just called Untitled Brushes. I saved it as Colin's Brushes. And, I could click in Colin's Brushes here if I want to overwrite that. And then click Save, Replace. And now these brushes are there. So now if I was to delete these brushes, boom, now they're gone. I don't have my brushes anymore. What am I going to do? Then all I need to do is just click on this little arrow. Now remember, we're doing this as brushes. It's the same as for gradients, patterns, whatever. It's the same. And now I'm going to import brushes. So there's Colin's Brushes right there. Click OK, open. And now it will move to the end of the list. There's Colin's Brushes, and I click in there. And here's my brushes that I've saved. And there they are. They're all there. Okay, so that's how you can work with those brush groups. That's how you save them, and that's how you load them in. Same thing with patterns, gradients, shapes, all these different things. That's why I would say, hey, it'd be a good idea to create a group, maybe called Colin's Patterns. I might have to select the individual patterns. Let's have a look here, and we'll see. So why don't I choose here, and I'm going to, I need to select the individual items. In this case, so I could select those, and then I could export those patterns, and then when I'm done, I would import those patterns. So just remember, you want to select them. So click, hold the shift key, and click. It'll select all the ones in between. And same thing for the gradients, shapes, anything like that. We can save those. All right. So if we wanted to automate the process, I actually created an action. And this is something that you could do. And so I actually just created this action here. And let me just see where I put that. Backup presets. And if you look here, let me show you how it works, and then I'll talk about how you can create it. So I click on backup presets, and then I click the play button. Now it tells me to select the brushes, so I click stop, and I'm like, okay, which brushes do I want to select? Just these ones? Okay, great. Well, let me grab those, the Colin brushes. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit the play button again. And now it goes in here, and it gives me the option to save these brushes. Now I'm saving this to that same folder. Click Save, Replace. Select Patterns. Hit Stop, go to your patterns, select the patterns you want to save. Notice I can go across groups. So if I want to do the whole enchilada, just go to the first one, go all the way to the last one, hold down the shift key and click. All my patterns are there now. Hit the play button again, and I can call this all patterns. Click Save. Boom. Now it says select styles. Same thing. I'm going to go in there. I'm going to select those. And I'm just going to hit stop here because you get the idea. So I've created an action that goes through all the different presets and saves them. So from now on, if I want to back up all my presets and I'm adding new presets all the time, I can go through and I can do this, run this once a week, once a month, whatever. And this way I'm manually backing up all my presets into that Dropbox account so I have them all there no matter what happens, because when you update Photoshop, sometimes you lose your presets, as you guys know. So this way you know you've got them safe. Now, in order to create one of these actions, it's pretty simple. And then, of course, I'll show you in a second some of the things you can do that are built into Photoshop. But this is how you can build a bulletproof backup regimen. So essentially what you would do here to do this is you would just simply create a set. Oh, let's not create a set. We'll just create live from lockdown. We'll create a new action, backup, presets. And I'm just going to hit record. So how would I do this? It's really quite simple. What I would do is I would start with, maybe let's just do it with shapes. So I'm going to click here on my shapes and I'm going to choose to export selected shapes. And this goes to the custom shapes, but I want to go to this 2020 folder. So just create a folder, Dropbox, wherever you want to do it, and then just hit save. And then essentially what you would do is there's the shapes, let's grab the gradients. I'll just do a couple. Let's export these gradients, make sure we're going to that folder, because the action will remember. And then when you're done, just click stop. Because so now if we look at this that we've created, we can see, what are we doing? Custom shapes. We're doing gradients. So we can see the different things that we're doing. So what you want to do now, under this backup presets, you want to create a stop action. So go under there and then just choose to insert stop. And this message is going to say select patterns or whatever it is. And allow continue. That gives you that continue button. Click OK. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag that above that set. So now when I run this action, the first thing that pops up, select patterns. So that just reminds you to do something. So you're going to select the patterns you want to back up and then just hit the continue and that will do it. Now what you want to do too is duplicate this. So hold down the Alt or the Option key, drag out a copy of that stop, and it goes between there. So now we've got the gradients. So I'm double clicking on here. Change it to gradients. So this is how I gave myself the notes. And how do I know it's gradients? Because I'm clicking here, it says to gradient. This is custom shape. So you know what it is you're working with for those presets. So that's essentially how we did that. All right. So I know this is some pretty some heavy stuff, but this is going to be super useful for you guys, and it's going to just save you so much time in the long run. And also, the reason I'm going through this in so much in depth is because every time I do a video or a tutorial or mention presets, people ask me, how do I back up my brushes? How do I find my brushes? I lost my brushes or I lost my actions. So if you do what I'm showing you here, that's never going to happen again. All right, and you could also create an action to restore them if you wanted to. It would just be the same thing as I did here for backing them up, except you would just create that action and you would load them in. So you can do that too, so you can automate or loading them in. And then if we go under here, we have other options. So under the Edit menu, we go to Presets. We have the option to migrate presets. This is probably going to say there's nothing here. There we go. So what this does is if you have presets, so say you update Photoshop when Photoshop 2021 or whatever it's going to be called comes out. When you have the option to install Photoshop, don't replace the old version. You have that option. There's a checkbox that says replace old version, don't. And then it will install both of them. And then if you go under this migrate, this will look for all the presets. So say I put 2021 or whatever it is on here, and then I choose this, it's going to load in all the presets automatically from the previous version. So it's going to save you having to do that manually. And then there's one more option here under presets, which is import export presets. So if we go here and we choose to export the presets, this shows all the presets on my system right now. Look at this, we've got all of this. So we can see we've got workspaces, so these are all the workspaces we created. There's the presets workspace that I just created just today. So these get added, so whenever I create those, or styles, custom styles, scripts, patterns, brush presets, actions, there's the production actions, whatever. When you create these, we can go in there, and then if I want to export just one of them, all I need to do is, it's an HDR toning preset. I just click here, and that goes into the options to export. Or I could just choose them all. So let's just select, we could go in there and we could choose all of these just by clicking add all. And then if I hit export preset, this will export these into Creative Cloud. And that means when I want to find them later, let me export these. Okay, so this is going to our 2020 folder. Okay, that's fine. So I'm manually doing this. You could go to Creative Cloud or wherever you want. So I've put those into that 2020 folder, which is in Dropbox. So we can choose presets, and now we choose to import export presets. Well, we want to import them. Well, where are they? Well, let's select the import folder. There they are. And there's all those presets that I exported. There they are. And you could select all those presets now, and you could add just the ones you want, or you could add all of them, and then click import presets, and all those presets will now be loaded into Photoshop. So we've basically just gone through all the different presets. So drop your questions in there, what you guys might have on these. We've just gone through all of those presets right now. And you can, I know it was a lot of information, and I imagine you're probably going to have to go and watch the replay in order to do this. So these will be up afterwards when we're finished with this this live stream. Give it about 15 minutes to 30 minutes, and YouTube will put the replay there so you can rewatch this whenever you want. Because I know some of you guys are going to have to rewatch that, because that's a lot of information we just went through. So if you've got any questions, guys, drop those questions in there right now. And, to do with the presets. And in a second, we're going to do Fix My Photo. So let's see, we've got some questions here, and let's see how many of these I've answered. Quite a few there. I can see Bruce has picked up a few. Can you put your favorites at the top of the list? Yeah, absolutely. All you do is you just drag them. So you don't pin them, you just drag them to the top. And you can drag these out of groups. So you could just create one super group if you didn't want these sets. For example, if I just want all these textures together, I just drag them like that, and they're all together. So you can move the sets by dragging the order of those, nesting them under each other, or the different presets within them. So anything can be dragged. So that's why if you look here under my gradients, notice I have foreground and background, transparent and white at the top. When you open them up, they're going to be in this basics folder. But it makes no sense to me. I drag them out so they're going to be available whenever I go in here. And by the way, these are also available. All these presets are also available when you're working in, your different groups. So, if you go in here and you choose to do a gradient fill, for example, all the gradients that you load in are going to be here. And every single one of these, when you do it through the menu, adjustment layers, fills, all those different things, all these same presets are going to be available. All right. Is there a quick way to delete a bunch you duplicated by mistake? Yep. If, I duplicated all of these, I would just select it, hit the shift key, selects them all, and then just drag them into the trash. Gone. Or the whole group. If you accidentally, duplicated this whole group, just drag that group into the trash. So that's how you can do that. That's to answer Wenda's. That was Polka Dot Studios question. Wenda asks, can you store these patterns in your Photoshop libraries? Yes, you can go into your libraries. And by the way, libraries got an update. I don't know if you guys noticed, but they've got this flat look now. Yeah, so of course you can create these in here. And, I've got things like I've created like templates, or where's a better example? Overlays. So I get a lot of my patterns and stuff I copy in here. There's brushes. Yeah, you can drag these in and you can create libraries out of those. How do you get the pattern you created to show on your screen? To get a pattern that you created, let's go here. All you need to do is just drag it into your document, and that will appear right there as a layer. double click on that layer will give you the options to choose a different one. These are ones that I created, my custom ones. And of course you can go in here, you can change the angle size, all these different kinds of things. That was Mini. Joe, when you drag a pattern from one group to another, is it a move or a copy? When you're dragging it from one to another, it is a move. Charles, are these presets preserved with the next release of Photoshop? They will be if you back them up, like I just showed you, and then that way you are future-proof forever. Donald, can you make presets like this in Camera Raw? No. Camera Raw has its own presets, which is basically remembering where the sliders are. So that's different. Polka Dot Studios, if you have floating presets alone, if you have a floating preset alone, can you easily make them into a group? Yeah, sure. You just create a group and then just drag them into that group. So you would just go in there, you could click on that little folder there, that would create that group, and then just drag them in there. Betty, is there a limit to the number of brushes you should keep online with the program before you start to bog it down? So what I would suggest there, Betty, is don't back up all your brushes into one big group. Just go into the different sets of brushes and back those up individually, and that way you can just load them what you need. Because one of the things too is if you get an overload of presets, you start to get too many presets into Photoshop, whether they be brushes, patterns, whatever, eventually it's going to start to bog it down and slow down the performance. And sometimes also you can have crashes if you get a buggy preset. So just keep it to what you're actually going to use. Don't load in stuff that you don't need. And also when you reset the preferences inside of Photoshop, this can also reset a lot of these presets. So just remember that. Make sure you back them all up before you ever reset your preferences. Rosie says, after you migrate, do you delete the old version? No, you don't need to. When you back up the new ones, you can just overwrite them with the newest version. I wouldn't delete them as soon as you migrate them, because if something happens and Photoshop crashes and you lose them, you want to make sure you've got that copy. So never delete a backup unless you've created a newer one first. Kathy asks, if you choose all to export, will it overwrite past exports in CC or duplicate them? Well, it depends. If you're talking about through the menus, if they have the same names, it will overwrite them. If they have new names, it will just create a new field there. So that's basically based on the naming. John says, for a new brush you have created, what is the difference between a brush preset and a tool preset? Well, the brush preset is going to live inside the brushes panel. So when you create a brush preset, we go in here, we've got the brush, and also, you have access to it to go in and create all these, to change all these different settings. But the big difference is it lives in the brushes panel where you grab a tool preset. So let me grab a brush, and I'm like, okay, I want this brush. So this is selected, the soft round 66. Now I can always go into the brush settings and change the settings here. There it is, 66. But what it's going to do is, rather than working with the brushes presets here, so we click on brushes, here it is in the brushes panel, and you'll find it there. And when you create the tool preset, it just appears in the preset panel. So this is useful for commonly used brushes. So maybe there's certain brushes that you're going to use, almost like your favorites. You could put these into the tool presets. And also remember, the tool preset has the ability to remember the color. So Sherry, if storing in Photoshop library, does it slow down Photoshop? In the library, well, if you start to get a lot of items into the library, it shouldn't really slow down Photoshop, but it could slow down the loading. So when you load Photoshop, if you have a lot of items to load, it's going to take longer for Photoshop to start. And also, if you go to a new computer and you log in with your Creative Cloud library, remember it has to upload or download all of these items that are in here. Now, you can be working while it's working in the background. So the libraries don't affect the performance as much as the panels do. So just remember, bear that in mind. In particular, if you're on an internet connection and a cyber cafe or something like that, that's going to be connecting and using bandwidth to download all these items if you are working on a new install. Now remember, when these download to your machine, so if you're at home, say for example, and you've got good Wi-Fi, go with your Wi-Fi, log in, and these will stay. These are local, but they sync in the cloud. So if something changes, it's going to change it in the cloud, but you don't have to be connected to the internet all the time to have these. If they're not downloaded, you need to be connected to the internet for them to download, if that makes sense. So any more questions here? No. Okay, so we're good for questions. So I think what we're going to do now is we're going to go to fix my photo. And here we are at Fix My Photo. And this is the segment where I work on your photographs. So these are the photos that you guys have submitted. And there's the instructions there on how to submit them. Now, I encourage you to submit photos each week. We go to fixmyphoto.net, and then you'll have a Dropbox link there where you can put your photos on there. I prefer raw files. Original raw files would be best, so I can go in and make those adjustments and change different things. If you don't have raw files, just the best quality you can upload there. Put your name in the file name. That's really important. And then the other thing is we're going to have no more than 3 submissions per week. So that means if you have submitted previously, you can submit again each week, but we just don't want to do more than 3 for each person each week, if that kind of makes sense. So let's have a look here, and why don't we jump in here? And here we are. So we got some submissions from this week. And so why don't we have a look at a couple of these? Let me double click in there. We're going to open this one up in Camera Raw. And this is Donald Haynes. Are you in the house, Donald? If you are, say hello. Here we are. It's a great photo here. Now I'm curious, were you elevated or did you shoot this with your drone? Actually, 5D Mark III. So I'm going to say you were in an elevated position unless you were flying a big heavy lifter. So this is a county fair, I believe, somewhere. Looking for the clue of where it is. I don't know. Maybe it's Orange County Fair. I don't know because I live in Orange County. So nice picture here. And we see Donald Haynes. Here you are. There you are. Good to see you. From the Sky Chair. Of course, from one of the rides. Looks great. We love this elevated position. So you know what we're going to do with this one? I'm going to open this into Photoshop. And you know what? This is one that could work really well as a tilt shift. So what we're going to do is a fake miniaturization effect on here and see if it'll work. So what we're going to do is we're going to go down to the filter. And under filter, we're going to go to our blur gallery. Now under blur gallery, we've got tilt shift. Now, I've seen people use the tilt shift for depth of field. It's not what it's for. Use field blur for depth of field. But let's do tilt shift. And then what this enables us to do is to create a little slice of focus. Now, by dragging, we can change, how thin do we want this slice? Let's make it a little thinner. And then by creating this thinner slice of focus, what this does is it kind of emulates a little bit like what you would get with a tilt shift lens, but it also gives it a kind of a macro look. So let's increase the blur. Notice as we go there, it changes the blur. And let's make it a little bit wider. And if we click and drag in the middle here, we can move this up or down. And because how quickly this falls out of focus, it starts to make it look like we're shooting with miniatures. And this is how we can get that miniaturization effect. So you guys are familiar with it, where everything looks like a toy. We can go there, we can go up there, we can do it at an angle. There's different ways that we can go in here and play around with those. And you can see just by clicking and dragging on a different, if you want the angle, you go there. And then when we click OK, it gives us that little, toy. It makes things look like, little models, little model people. And one of the things you might want to do when you do this is, let's go under the filter. We're going to go back to Camera Raw. And one of the things I like to do when I do this is give it a little boost of vibrance. Just make it unreal and push the saturation up. Click OK. And the reason I did that is because when you look at little plastic models and people paint them, they tend to be more saturated than what you would get in real life. So when when you look at Legos or different things like that, so that's something we could do there. That's one of the many options that we could do with that photo. Great photo. Thanks for sharing. And let's have a look at Minnie. Minnie, are you in the house? We're going to look at Minnie and we're going to look at Hagen. So I'm going to double click. I'm just selecting, control click on two of these. And now we're going to right click and we're going to choose to open in Camera Raw. Let's open these in Camera Raw right now. So this first one is a typical situation where we've got strong backlighting. Unfortunately, this is a JPEG, so we're not going to get as much dynamic range to play with. A JPEG is limited to an 8-bit image, which is 8 bits of color per channel, or 256 colors per channel. So it doesn't give us quite as much to play with, but I think we could probably still recover some of the details so we can see who we've got in the foreground. So why don't we go to the highlights? We're going to recover the highlights all the way up. And by doing that, that enables us to open up our exposure a little bit. There we go. And we start to see a little bit of who this is. Open up the shadows. We get a little bit more. Notice it's getting a little bit noisy there, so we're going to have to go back. Let's increase our exposure. We're not going to get all the way there with this. And once again, that's because we're working with a JPEG. A RAW file would definitely give us a lot more to play with. We could, pull back on our whites a little bit. And let's just pull our blacks in there. So if we look at this, this is what we're getting before and after. So we can pull out a bit of dynamic range. One of the things you're going to notice here is we're going to get noise. So we want to definitely fix that noise. Let me just move myself to the left. And then what we want to do is go in there and see if we can fix that. So if we go under the detail here, we can choose our noise reduction. Watching the noises in the shadow there. Let's do the color noise. And regular noise. There we go. So we're getting rid of that graininess in there. You could do that. And of course you could also use the adjustment brush if you wanted to go in and try and get a bit more detail. But there's not enough dynamic range in this shot that we're actually going to be able to see this face without getting a lot of noise. Let me show you. So if I grab the adjustment brush here, and let's just make it a little bit bigger, and we can paint around the face area. Let me just show you. There's our mask options, will show us where we're painting. And we can open up our exposure. See, you're not going to get it because it wasn't captured on the sensor. So we can recover our highlights, open up those shadows. And, as I said, if it's not on the sensor, we can't recover it. The RAW file is going to give you a lot more dynamic range. That means it's going to capture more detail in the highlights and the shadows at the same time. So if you were doing that, you would be able to recover more. So unfortunately, you're not going to be able to recover everything, but you could definitely recover a lot there. Let me grab that brush though, because we don't like that. Just hit the delete key to get rid of it. Maybe you put a vignette or something around it, and we can improve it a little bit. All right, so let's have a look at Minnie's image. This is a really nice photo. Are you here, Minnie? Let's go here, and what we're going to do is let's just see if we can get a little bit more. Go to our basic adjustments. So one of the things I'm going to do is usually I'm going to start inside of Photoshop, or I'm going to start in Lightroom. When I say in Photoshop, that's inside Camera Raw. Now remember, the adjustments in Camera Raw are identical to the adjustments inside of Lightroom. So we're going to start the basic panel, and we'll do some quick adjustments here. So why don't we looking at our histogram at the top there. Notice it's a little pushed into the shadows. So why don't we, just open up the exposure a little bit. So we're just rebalancing that histogram. And I think that's helping. Notice as that moves it across. We've got a little bit of shadow clipping. So if we pull this, we could open that up. And I would prefer this shot, see, one of the things that Mini did that Hagen didn't do is Mini underexposed the shot. Notice the details in the highlights are not being blown out. In this case here, this was exposed for the sun, for the sunset, which worked really well. We were able to capture the sun, but we weren't able to bring out the details in the subject. So this is like one of those situations where, you know, it was better to underexpose, which you've done well there, Hagen. This is a situation where you would do an HDR, either in-camera HDR, or you would bracket the shot where we could bring out this foreground detail and the background detail individually. Or, of course, a raw file, you would get a lot of this back. Here, this is a raw file, so we've got more to kind of play with. All right, so let's go. We're going there. Let's look at our highlights. Now, I'm recovering these highlights. I'm looking at this area here. We don't want to lose the detail there. So we've got some texture that we want to preserve. So I'm going to pull these highlights up. So preserving that texture there, because, you know, this is old, maybe an abandoned boat. I can see the window's broken. It's getting a little bit, the grain is coming out as that paint's peeling. And so we definitely want that. This is telling a lot of the story, so make sure we don't lose that detail. So right now, all we're doing is just balancing our exposure or balancing our histogram. Looks nice. We've got a little bit of a sunset going on there. We could enhance that by pushing into warmer, or we could balance into the cooler. I kind of liked it where it was, so we're going to double click. I like the white balance. Okay, but we like this texture. We really want that to come out because this is telling the story about the old boat. So we're going to take the texture, and let me just zoom out. If we increase the texture here, notice how we can really make that pop. But the problem is we're also making this wheat pop. And I kind of like that wheat a little bit smoother or a little bit softer. So we're going to go under our adjustment brush. Let's grab the adjustment brush, turn on mask options and auto mask, and let's paint. It's a little too big. And what I want to do too is I'm going to turn my density and my flow up high. And I'm going to hit the left bracket key to make this a little bit smaller. And let's go in here and we're just going to paint around the shape of this boat. Now it's going to do its best to auto mask, and to be honest, it's not working fantastically on this image. I mean, it's working, but not amazing. But that's okay. So if you go over, just hit the Alt or the Option key, and we'll turn, see if we can just kind of clean out those edges a little bit. There we go. Now, if you use a smaller brush when you were doing this, you would get a better selection. Now, one of the things, let go often, because that way if we hit undo, it's only going to undo the last stroke, and we don't undo our whole thing. Because, you know, imagine if you get everything right, and then you go, oh man, I just want to fix that, and then you hit undo, and you had not released, you'd be undoing the entire thing. So hold the Alt or the Option key, just drag, release, and it's just kind of locking those into the different steps. Great, let's just make sure I'm clicking in here. I'm going to turn auto mask off now, and I'm just going to paint in the middle. And what it's doing is it's just making sure I didn't miss any of the texture. Once again, if you're not in as much of a hurry as I am, you might work with a smaller brush and work closer. But this is pretty forgiving. Okay, so let's turn off the mask options, and now we can go in here and let's crank that texture. Boom. Notice now it's just affecting the boat. So let's make that texture really strong, maybe give it a little punch of clarity. Maybe even go into the dehaze. So we're going pretty far with that. Let's turn the exposure down just a touch. Let's recover those highlights again. Open up those shadows more. Okay, now that we've got the detail in the shadows and highlights, let's balance the exposure so it fits the rest of the image. And if we look at this, you know, here's before and after. Notice how we're really making the texture pop on that boat. And one of the things you might want to do too is let's do the overall image, because when we do these basic adjustments, this is also going to adjust everything inside of the image, including the localized brush adjustments. I just want to straighten this. Let's hit the crop tool. This is where you'll see the straighten, this little level. Let's drag that up a little bit this way and see if we can get that looking a little bit more level. All right, so that's starting to look a little bit better there, I think. And one of the other things you might want to do, I like the color, so this is now going to be an entirely artistic or creative choice, is maybe take this vibrance and pull it back a little bit to reduce some of the color. This is, once again, this is a creative choice. And we're going to pull that back, and by doing that, let me zoom in a little bit, it lets this texture just kind of show through a little bit more. Now, if you want, we could go in and we could go to our localized brush, select that brush there, click, and now we're adjusting just that area that we selected. And now I could go and I could bring some of this color back. So let's take the saturation and pull it back. So now we're putting more of that color. We're restoring the color now in the boat, but not in the background. And then by doing that, it just kind of enables us to just kind of make that boat pop a little bit more. And let's see, did Minnie say hello in the chats there? Oh yes, Minnie, hi, how are you? I'm glad you could join us. Beautiful photo. Thank you for sharing with us. And so let's go back to our overall adjustments, and maybe I'm going to give this a little push of contrast now. And one of the things you might also want to do, if you wanted, is you could add some kind of a vignette. Well, why don't we do a gradient first? Let's grab a gradient. We're going to use our graduated filter, and we're just going to darken the sky. So let's drag that down. Let's take our exposure down a little bit. So we're getting this a little bit more moody. You don't want it too much or it's going to look fake. But I'm dragging that down there. That's looking pretty good. And you know what? I'm going to create a second gradient and drag it up. So rather than doing a vignette, I'm doing a gradient from the top and a gradient from the bottom. And then if we look at this image here, we've got that, and there's before and there's after. So we've gone, a little bit different with this, but we're really focusing on bringing out the texture. Let me just open this up here inside of Photoshop. So hopefully you like what I'm doing to your image there, Minnie. Let me know. Okay, let's have a look. Let me just bring up those comments. Yes, of course I can save that and send it to you. And Liz saying it gives it a 3D look. So, one of the things you might want to do to just finish this off is just do a little bit of sharpening. But I just want to sharpen maybe just the boat area. So one of the things I should have done is open this as a smart object. If I'd opened this as a smart object, this would give me the option to go back and play with those adjustments again. Usually I do. But let's duplicate this background. We're going to throw this into overlay blending mode. And now I'm just going to create high pass sharpening. So we're just going to choose the filter other, and we're going to go to high pass. And this high pass really lets us pump this texture. So this is a nice way to sharpen the photo. Now once again, I really want to sharpen the boat. Maybe not that much. That's nice. 1.2. Notice I'm keeping the number pretty low. But if you look at this before and after, you know what? I'm going to go just a little bit more. Let me undo that. There we go. And let's go under the filter again. This time we're going to go to the high pass. And I'm just going to do a little bit more. The 1.2 actually looks good to my eye. But I'm going to go higher just so you guys can really see what's happening. Now, if I hide this before and after, you can see, I like what we're doing in the texture on the boat, but it's a little much in some of the areas in the background. So this is the nice thing about high pass sharpening. We can hide all the sharpening, hold down the Alt or the Option key, and create a layer mask. And what that does is that inverted mask hides everything. So we're going to grab a brush, and we're going to paint with white on this mask, and I'll just keep the flow and opacity up and watch what happens. Now as I'm painting, see what I'm doing? I'm painting on that sharpening, and I'm just sharpening the boat now. See that? So we're not sharpening the background, we're keeping the background soft, we're sharpening the boat. And if you wanted to, maybe not quite as much, we could take the opacity down a little bit, take it a little lower, and our flow down. And we can paint just a little bit into the foreground. There we go. So we didn't apply, if I click on this mask, the Alt or the Option click, you can see that we didn't apply as much to the foreground as we did to the boat. So this is the nice thing about high pass sharpening. Maybe we give it a little bit more, but you can vary how much sharpening you're putting on different parts of the image. So I'm sharpening that foreground up a little bit more. There we go. And so if we look at this before, no sharpening, and then after. So I'll save this out for you, Minnie. Save as. And we'll just do this after. So if you don't mind contacting me at Minnie, just contact me at photoshopCAFE. Go to photoshopcafe.com and you'll see the contact. And give me your email address, and I would be more than happy to email this to you. All right, guys, so what we're going to do now is we're going to hang out, and we're going to do some more questions and answers, and we're going to do a little bit of kind of hangout time. But what we're going to do now is we're going to end the official part of the training right now. So if you came for the training, thank you very much, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something, that's kind of useful. So anyway, don't forget, if you like this, to hit that like button. Just smash it into dust. And also, if you haven't yet subscribe to photoshopCAFE, and you're going to get new tutorials from me every single week, as well as our live stream. And now we're going to go back to our questions and answers.